In ancient Egypt, the Pyramid Age has begun. Now, a new pharaoh ascends the throne. To hold on to power, he will marry his sister, conquer new territories, reorganize his entire country.
The members of the royal house can't by themselves control all this.
And build not one, but 3 giant pyramids.
You have to think as the architects and the engineers did. You know, their life's on the line.
The story of the pyramids is one of innovation,
It was a resurrection machine.
mysterious rituals,
These are things that help the deceased re-energize and live for eternity.
back-breaking work, and palace intrigue. Unlock the deepest secrets of the pharaohs.
Every mummy is different. You never know exactly what to expect.
Explore the lives of ancient workers and uncover the remarkable story of Egypt's old kingdom.
Not only did ancient Egypt make the pyramids made ancient Egypt.
In the scorching Egyptian desert, a stone mountain rises almost 350 feet from the sand. This is the Red Pyramid at Dashur. Some 60 million cubic feet of rock. It's the first flat-sided true pyramid in Egypt, the work of a powerful pharaoh called Snefru. At the Cairo Museum, Egyptologist Salima Ikram is investigating the greatest pyramid builder in history.
This statue of King Snefru comes from his temple at Dashur. He's wearing the crown of Upper Egypt. He was once beautifully painted. You can still see the paint in his eyes and the redness of his skin. But now, barely anyone has heard of him. Snefru, who is the person who really laid the foundations for a great pyramid building, lots of monuments, ideas of kingship, is all but forgotten.
To solve the mystery of why Snefru built not 1, but 3 record-breaking pyramids, and how his ambition brought cultural revolution to Egypt, we need to travel more than 4,600 years back in time. When Snefru was a young boy, the largest pyramid that exists is the Step Pyramid at Saqqara, the first pyramid ever built in Egypt. A king called Djoser had ordered it constructed 70 years earlier, kicking off the Pyramid Age in Egypt and revolutionizing the country's government and building capabilities in the process. The Step Pyramid must have made a strong impression on the young Snefru, compelling him to dream of an even bigger and more beautiful pyramid for himself. An ambitious dream, especially because Snefru does not begin life as the heir to the throne of Egypt. He's thought to have been born to a secondary wife of his father, King Huni, and he has brothers who are closer in line to the throne.
And of course, that would lead to some struggles for succession. Children of one queen or one woman might be in competition with others. Legitimation is a key element in kingship.
If he's not the eldest son or he's outside of the dynasty or the family, he should invent a story. He should come with something, with a reason to tell the people that he has the right to be the king.
History doesn't record how an adult Snefru eventually pushes aside his brothers to ascend the throne, or at what age. But he did, and to reinforce his legitimacy, he chooses a queen with unquestionable ancestry. His half-sister, Hetep-Heres, daughter of his father and the great royal wife. It's a clever move by Snefru, because marrying his own sister also reinforces his image as a god in the eyes of his people.
From the very beginning of ancient Egyptian kingship, the king is seen as a personification of the falcon god Horus.
His queen, Hetep-Heres, was also believed to be divine.
The queen, as the consort, is the personification of the goddess Hathor.
Hathor and Horus, they're both children of Ra, and so they're siblings. And so actually having brother and sister, king and queen, was not taboo at all.
So the king and queen together are essential to the way the Egyptians presented their politics, as well as their religion.
Hetep-Heres will rule alongside Snefru as a demigod.
At this time period, women had a lot more power than their contemporaries anywhere else in the world did, and especially royal women. We know that a lot of these women helped rule. They were really sometimes powers behind the throne and sometimes equal partners with their husbands.
Of course, as the king's main royal wife, she is also expected to produce a son who will inherit the throne. Snefru rules over a vast land, split up into districts called nomes.
Each district of Egypt, each nome has its capital city, no doubt numerous small villages and farming communities spread around the Nile Valley.
We can compare the nome with a city, and we can compare the villages to a district in the city.
But full and ultimate power lies with the pharaoh.
The economy in Egypt was very centralized, meaning that a lot of the goods that were farmed or harvested found their way into the capital. Your average Egyptian was living pretty subsistence-wise, pretty meager.
As taxes in the form of grain and goods are amassed by Snefru, he decides to funnel his vast wealth into tomb building. In the royal palace, the king summons a man that many believe to be his son. His name is Nefermat. Snefru appoints his son vizier, the second most powerful position in the country.
If we can compare an ancient Egyptian vizier to nowadays, he is a kind of a prime minister with all ministers underneath him.
So Snefru seems to be trying to keep at least a lot of the important positions in the country within the control of the family.
The reason that you would want to do this is so that power doesn't become spread out and doesn't become a problem where it fractures the kingship.
But with great power comes great responsibility, and Nefermat faces a daunting task. Snefru has commanded his son to build a pyramid tomb that will surpass anything ever built before. The tallest pyramid on the planet is Djoser's 6-step monument. Snefru's will have 8 steps and be more than 100 feet higher.
You could look at this as a bit of a competition in pyramid building, with each succeeding pharaoh trying to outdo the predecessor.
Snefru knows the bigger his pyramid, the greater his legacy, the longer he's going to be remembered.
What he's looking for is something new, exciting, bigger, better, and more perfect than anyone has ever created before.
Djoser's step pyramid is built at Saqqara. Snefru's pyramid will be at Meidum, 40 miles to the south. As work begins, Nefermat and his team must know that they have a huge challenge ahead. In ancient Egypt, the king's son, Nefermat, has brought together a huge workforce to build a pyramid tomb fit for his father. It's a big task. Thousands of Egyptian civilians will be drafted into service. To keep control over his people, Snefru seeks to emphasize his role in maintaining order and prosperity. He changes his name to Horus Neb Ma'at, meaning Horus, the master of the Ma'at.
Ma'at is the concept of truth or justice, or you might think of it as universal order or harmony.
It is the king's most important role on earth to maintain Ma'at. Ancient Egyptians saw the world through this lens of order and chaos.
The opposite of the Ma'at is chaos. If you have chaos, there is no order, and the order is above everything.
So for the king to say, I am the Lord of Ma'at, means basically he wants his reign to be very even and balance everything out properly.
Snefru is giving his subjects little choice. They either obey him or risk the entire universe collapsing. Good motivation for the thousands of citizens he compels to work on his grand new construction project.
The ancient Egyptians believed that by constructing a tomb for the king, that they were enhancing the order of the cosmos itself. So pyramid construction during the reign of Snefru can in some ways be seen as a fulfillment of his own name, the Lord of Ma'at, the Lord of cosmic harmony or order.
Crucially, Snefru is not the only one who will benefit.
The point of the pyramid was to get the king resurrected on the other side of death, for him to join the stars and the gods, and for him to take his entire community with him, nothing less than the entirety of Egypt.
It's almost an ideological idea that they are building something for the Pharaoh, who is a living god, and they hope, the workers, upon their death, that they will be part of the Pharaoh's reconstituted kingdom in the hereafter.
Life and death for them was totally intertwined. That's why it looks like they're so obsessed with death and tombs.
Using the building know-how and supply chain set up by previous pharaohs, Nefermat's workers make fast progress. In just 7 years, the project is nearing completion. This is the monument that Nefermat was building, the largest pyramid of the time, rising 8 steps, the so-called Meidum Pyramid.
When we look at the Meidum Pyramid today, the first thing you'll see is the massive steps, but then you'll also see that there's a pile of rubble that just sits around the bottom of the pyramid.
Today, only the stone core remains standing. It reaches 230 feet above the ground. But when this pyramid was complete, it was higher still, 305 feet. During the Middle Ages, builders removed much of the collapsed exterior and reused the stones in their own constructions. It is literally a monumental achievement, seemingly the ultimate tomb for a god king. But Snefru has other ideas.
He started with Meidum, and that was conceived from the very beginning as a step pyramid. And he works there for a bit and decides that it's not really adequate.
The king sets his vizier Nefermat an even greater challenge. Snefru demands an entirely new monument. An even bigger pyramid with smooth and flat sides instead of steps. It's a revolutionary idea. The first true pyramid in Egypt. To design this second pyramid and meet his father's demands, Nefermat must start from scratch. He begins by choosing a new site 30 miles north of his first pyramid, at Dashur. This new construction site is close to the fine limestone that Nefermat will need to create the flat outer casing.
You have to create smooth-sided casing stones. So this is going to be increasing yet more the amount of work that you have to do in the quarrying and dressing of stones.
But as work begins on the new site, the team doesn't completely abandon Snefru's original pyramid at Meidum.
So what they did is an insurance policy. They go back to the first pyramid that he started building at Meidum and finish that up in case he dies.
So the infrastructure that is required, not just to build two enormous monuments, but to build them not that close one to the other, really would be something unheard of.
Two giant pyramid building sites at the same time. Snefru and Nefermat are taking on perhaps the biggest logistical and engineering challenge in human history so far.
You can be pretty sure that there is a huge expense in terms of labor, in terms of goods that are needed to fund these particular building projects.
To fund his two building projects, Snefru sets up more royal estates, farms dedicated to the cause.
Royal estates were the ones that provided the food, the beer, the cattle that was needed for the workers that were building his various monuments, but he expanded it tenfold, particularly in the Nile Delta.
So Snefru's pyramid projects aren't just about the stone of the pyramids themselves. They're about the farmland and the herds of cattle and all of the people associated with those estates.
The sheer scale of the operation is too much for the royal family to manage alone.
The food and nutrition, the raw materials, the chisels, the hammers, the limestone.
All over the country, Snefru drafts in new civil servants to enforce palace orders.
Bureaucracy is increasing. That's why the state is becoming more complicated, and that's why the members of the royal house can't by themselves control all this.
Snefru will need to recruit manpower from lower ranks, paving the way for a new social class to emerge. Now, historians are unpacking the remarkable story of one individual who rose through the ranks. It's a story that exposes the silent revolution taking place in Egypt. In ancient Egypt, Snefru's 2 pyramid construction projects are too much for the royal family to manage alone. Now, the remarkable rise of one non-royal man is exposing how Egypt's administration is changing. His name is Metjen. Clues about Metjen's life are inscribed on the walls of his tomb, discovered at Saqqara, but now at the Egyptian Museum in Berlin.
Typically, administrators left a list of titles that they held when they were alive, but with Metjen, he actually fleshes out the works from his lifetime.
The hieroglyphs reveal that Metjen was born far from the splendor of the royal palace, probably in a village in the Nile Delta. His father, a judge, ensures that Metjen receives a good education. He learns to read, write, and keep accounts.
We know that the ancient Egyptians prized literacy. We even have texts that say, "You shall love writing more than your mother, for it is the greatest of all professions."
If you are a scribe, it means you can get a very important position in the state administration because reading and writing was very rare in ancient Egypt.
Metjen begins by working in a supply store, perhaps supplying workers at the Pharaohs' construction site. He's a tiny cog in a vast pyramid-building machine, but a cog that is getting noticed by his superiors. Soon, the ruling elite, perhaps even a royal family member, promotes Metjen, giving him the title of rural judge. His job is to determine the boundaries of fields and other land, a vital role in an economy based on agriculture. Once again, he stands out and gets another promotion. Metjen becomes administrator of the city of Zoe, a city in the heart of the Nile Delta region. It's his first government position.
So an individual administrator might be in charge of several different districts, apparently at the same time.
To reward the loyalty and work of people like Metjen, Snefru creates a new social class by giving people land of their own. The pursuit of pyramid building is transforming the administration of Egypt.
King is juggling now, maintaining as much control as possible, keeping as many things as possible within the family, and yet at the same time inevitably trying to maintain control of these growing non-royal families of administrators who are coming to be much more powerful in the provinces.
The huge changes in society are mirrored by innovation at Snefru's pyramid sites. The outside of Snefru's new pyramid isn't the only feature undergoing a radical overhaul in design. Snefru's vizier, Nefermat, has built the funeral chamber underneath the pyramid, as is tradition. But Snefru wants something revolutionary. He is adamant that the funeral chamber is built within the masonry of the pyramid itself. He has good reason to be concerned about the chamber's location. Tomb raiding is rampant, often inside jobs by the builders themselves. Raiders destroy mummies in their hunt for jewelry and other treasures or amulets.
The royals knew, essentially, that creating these large monuments that drew attention to themselves would also draw attention to the goods that were buried there.
Deterring these robbers becomes a top priority.
In New Kingdom Egypt, a number of the tomb robbers we know were said to be impaled, apparently. So it didn't necessarily go well.
At the time, the Egyptians believed that if a body is desecrated, the soul would not survive in the afterlife. So protecting the mummy within an inaccessible vault would have been of critical importance to the pharaoh. Snefru orders his funeral chamber hidden in the heart of his new pyramid, and for elaborate blocking mechanisms to be built, protecting the passageways with giant stone blocks.
When you look at the outside of the pyramid, you don't really think about the engineering that was required in order to create these inner rooms, essentially the burial of the king.
Nefermot must build a space that will withstand the weight of thousands of tons of stone. Get it right, and he'll create a unique funeral chamber for the king. Get it wrong, and the king's very survival in the afterlife is in danger. In Dashur, at Snefru's second pyramid, Egyptologist Vasil Dobrev is investigating the secret behind the monument's revolutionary funeral chamber. The entrance is high up on the pyramid's north face, but inside, a steep passageway first plunges 300 feet down into the bedrock beneath the pyramid. Then the route climbs back upwards until it reaches a chamber that pokes above ground level. Vasil has reached the first chamber that ancient builders needed to keep safe from collapse. The room measures just 13 feet wide, but 55 feet high.
Reaching this point is quite challenging. We went up dozens of feet, we went down almost 300 feet into the ground. But here we are at ground level. But the problem is that the whole pyramid was going to be placed directly on this void. And how do you protect that void? How did they make sure it doesn't collapse? And that's where they came up with this very ingenious solution.
The builder's solution is a corbelled ceiling, a room where the walls gradually get closer together as each layer of blocks is added, until the sides meet at the top, forming a vault that supports itself.
This chamber is the first test. It worked and they enlarged it, because they'd already planned another chamber, which this time would be the burial chamber within the body of the monument itself, above ground level.
The ancient engineers realized that the wider the floor space, the higher the corbelled ceiling needs to be. So when they build a final chamber within the body of the pyramid itself, they choose modest dimensions.
Finally, we arrive in Snefru's burial chamber. We must not forget that there is still almost 230 feet of monument above this chamber.
The long wooden beams they used to reinforce the room still survive today. They are cedar wood, shipped in from outside Egypt.
These beams that are placed in the four walls act as a surrounding wall that protects the sarcophagus. Much later in history, we have a spell in what is called the Book of the Dead, a very well-known list of resurrection spells. And it says very clearly, put cedar beams in the wall, throw water over it, and that's what protects you from your enemies. And that's very interesting because that's a magic spell that's been passed down for centuries and centuries. In fact, maybe here is the first time it was used.
But despite the huge engineering and magical effort, archaeologists now believe that Snefru's mummy wasn't laid to rest in this revolutionary chamber. And that could be because this second pyramid didn't turn out as planned.
The pyramid was a bit of an architectural disaster.
As Snefru's engineers built ever higher, cracks began to form.
You have to think, I think, as the architects and the engineers did. You know, their life's on the line. They're building this pyramid for the body of the king. And so they're trying to cure whatever happens to be going on within the pyramid. They're always looking for new ideas to save the pyramid so that it can be used.
Nefermat and his engineers realize that the angle they're building at is too steep. The added weight could cause complete collapse. They have no choice but to scale back their ambitions and change the angle of the pyramid's sides.
Snefru starts with a pyramid of 60 degrees. It's slipping and sliding because he's building on the natural desert surface. And so he puts a casing or a girdle around it at 54 degrees. But now the pyramid's getting really huge. As he's going up at 54 degrees, they're still having problems.
So Nefermat decides to change the slope of the summit. The changing angle transforms the pyramid into the bent shape we see today. It may not have been Snefru's original plan, but it was still a success of sorts.
It's a change that's perfectly planned and so well done that the monument has lasted for millennia. This is the first time that Snefru decides to make a smooth pyramid. Of the 120 or so pyramids known in Egypt, it is the best preserved. It still has almost 70% of its covering. So even after 4,600 years, we can still see it almost as it was then.
This double-sloped pyramid is set to become the tallest man-made structure on the planet, exceeding Snefru's Meidum pyramid by almost 40 feet. But Snefru is either hungry for a new record or doesn't consider the bent pyramid worthy, because once more, he orders Nefermat to build a new pyramid.
You have to wonder what the workers thought. Here they built 2 pyramids, and now they're off to build the 3rd one.
Once again, Nefermat chooses to build at Dashur, barely a mile from his bent pyramid. And once more, he doesn't abandon work at his previous site. Snefru is now running 3 huge projects at the same time, and he has a problem. Egypt is running out of manpower to support the workers. In ancient Egypt, King Snefru needs to find new resources and manpower to support his 3 pyramid projects. So he looks outside his kingdom.
We have hieroglyphic records that indicate successful military campaigns during the reign of Snefru.
Snefru invades the area of modern-day Libya in the west and Nubia in the south, and is said to return with thousands of captives.
I think it's a pretty good guess that they would have been put to work for the Egyptian state in general, probably in an agricultural capacity or in some sort of estate that would have been adding extra economic resources for Snefru's pyramids. By capturing foreigners, Snefru is probably expanding his economic base, his labor base.
Records of how these people were treated haven't been found, but the practice of bringing back manpower from conquests was well established. In addition to this new workforce, they captured 200,000 cows, as well as raw materials like copper, stone, and precious metals.
And this adds to the wealth of the country, and it adds to the wealth of the king himself, and it helps him to build his pyramid faster.
The new elite of his administration also benefit.
The elite people who were members of the royal court constructed their own tombs, and they decorated the walls with images of their day-to-day life. So we see farmers working on their estates, people herding their cattle, but we also get these great little details of what life was like for a member of the nobility in ancient Egypt. Music performances, dancing performances, banquets. We really get these details of a life of luxury.
They had fine clothes, fine jewelry, and the ability to have freedom, essentially, which is not something that a commoner would have.
Metjen is now an important figure in the kingdom. He has a title, Friend of the King. Metjen also holds the position of head of the palace of the cities of the southern lake. This is the palace inhabited by Snefru's various wives and consorts.
We have abundant evidence that queens had economic power and their own estates. So rather than thinking about a harem, a place where queens were secluded and had to be looked after to maintain their sexual purity, obviously, they were expected to remain faithful to the king, but the queen's palace was also its own economic entity.
The women, whether they be concubines or queens, actually did live in an area of the palace together. But the idea of that space is probably a lot less alluring than the word harem indicates. This situation is not one that is primarily sexual. So we just have to reframe the way we think of the women's quarters that are connected to the palace.
As well as working at the palace and enjoying its luxuries, Egyptologists think that women here were probably dedicated users of makeup.
Makeup use was very common for the ancient Egyptians. For women and men, they put eye makeup around their eyes, and this was a type of protection, both spiritually and physically. We see it aesthetically as something that's beautiful, but it also helped protect their eyes from eye disease and from flies.
Metjen's life has taken him from rural scribe to supply clerk to friend of the king. A radical rise to the upper class powered by the pyramids. Back at the construction site of Snefru's third pyramid, the builders have been hard at work. 18 years after they began his third pyramid, Snefru's last great monument is complete.
Today, this pyramid is called the Red Pyramid of Snefru, so it's a bit strange when you see the stones, because they are rather yellow. But there are reddish veins like this, as you can see here. The layer that has been deposited on them maybe gives a slightly reddish appearance today, but in fact, that's not how it appeared at the time. If you were in Snefru's time, at the end of his reign when all this was complete, it would have been a beautiful pyramid, smooth with a white coating.
The Red Pyramid is the first of its kind, the first successful move away from a step pyramid to one with smooth and flat sides. Like many pyramids in Egypt, later builders have removed and reused almost all the smooth casing stones that once covered it.
This block has an angle of 43 degrees, so this is a block from the casing of this pyramid. Once complete, it was covered in these white limestone blocks that shone like the sun's rays. That's the idea, in fact, because this pyramid acts as a solid form of the sun's rays.
With the Red Pyramid, Snefru seems to finally be satisfied.
The completed Red Pyramid was the first smooth-sided pyramid that really had been finished during the reign of Snefru.
And that's the one that we think that the king was actually buried in.
Snefru and his chief architect took the form of the step pyramid and evolved that form into a pure geometric pyramid. And that's why we still remember Snefru for this moment of genius.
Once the Red Pyramid was done, you can just imagine the architects and the engineer and the workers standing back and taking a look at this magnificent monument. Here they had the absolutely perfect resurrection machine for the pharaoh for eternity.
Snefru's Red Pyramid beats his own record one last time. This pyramid is even higher and wider than its bent neighbor. To construct Snefru's 3 pyramids, builders needed to use more than 120 million cubic feet of stone.
If you want to talk about moving cubic tons of limestone, probably the award has to go to Snefru. It's amazing. In fact, we couldn't believe in earlier eras that one king could build so many pyramids.
Egyptologists believe Snefru reigned between 30 and 40 years, a lifetime during which he instigated changes that would influence Egypt for millennia.
People focus only on the pyramids and wonder about the challenges, but it's not just the pyramid. We have to think about the changes that are taking place to the Egyptian economy and the Egyptian society. So Egypt itself is changing because of the emergence of the gigantic pyramid.
Well, with the time of Snefru, the country is getting bigger. The administration offices are getting bigger, and it was difficult for the royal family to keep control of everything.
Snefru's pyramid projects changed society because not only do you have to create the organization to quarry and move all the stones, the most stone volume ever moved in ancient Egypt in a single king's reign, but you also have to put in place the agricultural estates.
Increasingly, in the northern part of the Nile Valley, we're starting to see these new cities set up, these big plantation complexes that are being established to support the pyramid complexes of Egypt.
After Snefru, it will be his son Khufu who will take on the task of bringing Egypt and its pyramid-building people to new heights.
It was in the reign of Snefru that all the research and development was worked out, all the mistakes were made and the corrections were devised in order to make it possible for Khufu to come to the throne and build the biggest and most gigantic pyramid ever.